Good morning. I want to thank you so much for choosing this service to come to. Those of you here in person, it really means a lot. Our particularly middle service is packed, and we just want to continue to respect social distancing guidelines. So it really means a lot to me that you do that. Those of you joining online, welcome. We love you. And also, hello to our Jasper County Jail campus. We're so glad that you're with us. And man, I'm excited to be back in the second week of this series called Battlefield of the Mind. We're talking about how our mind is a battlefield. And like a house, our minds need to be kept in order. I don't know if you've ever been in a house that's been trashed or vandalized, and it just doesn't feel like a good place to be. And I think for a lot of us up in here, it's not a very good place to be right now. And this series is all about cleaning that up. This last week, we talked about emotional control. It was a great conversation, and I really enjoyed getting to see dozens of you choosing to follow Jesus. And then also last night, we had another Hebron launch team meeting. That building looks awesome. I'm so excited about the progress there, yeah. And we have seen so many families step up from the sidelines. I'm proud to announce that we have nearly 100 families that have chosen to be a part of launching that together. And that is just super exciting. So many of them are new to God and new to church or new to our church. And it's just cool to see people say it's time for us to start building rather than just consuming. And I'm thankful for those families. It's getting really exciting. I'd also like to ask people here to say, here I am, Lord, use me, as people are vacating some volunteer positions here, particularly in the nurseries and also in the band. It would be awesome for you to say, hey, I'm ready to serve here at Wheatfield too, because we need you. I'd like to ask the whole church to be praying for that team, pray for protection and favor and provision. Our next launch team meeting with that team is September 19th, and that will be held inside of this building here, that building in Hebron. And that's kind of cool to think, wow, it's coming up. And then in October, we're going to begin practice church up in there, which is like, whoa, that's remarkable. We're already doing practice church for our launch in November. So please be praying as a church. Pray for protection and favor and unity and provision. Elise kind of shared that really cool giving story. I just want to say thank you for giving to the ministry at this church. And we definitely need it. I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful to see God working through your lives. At the end of this service, we're going to talk a little bit more about what's happening there. But this week, I want to talk about doubt. And if you struggle with doubt in this life, if you struggle with trust issues in relationships, if you struggle with having peace and faith in God or in people around you, this message is for you. And even if you're not a Christian, I think this message is going to be exceedingly helpful for you. And the order of events, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell a foundational story. I'm going to make some points, and then I'm going to pull it all together with a great story from the Bible. And some of you are going to be like, Pastor, when are you going to bring the Holy Scriptures into this? And I'm going to make it the pinnacle of the message, but it's going to come at the end. It's going to be the pinnacle of the message, but coming at the end, just so you know. So let's start with a story. I want to ask you, have you ever been horseback riding? I'm a pretty brave person. I'll try anything. I don't mind heights or cliff jumping. I don't mind whitewater rafting. I'll ski double black diamonds. I'll try anything. I'll eat almost anything except for shrimp, which to me are the cockroaches of the sea. I'm not going to touch them. Yuck. I also don't like a lot of animals. I have a little bit of a fear of animals. Not an irrational fear, a legit multiple bad experience, dislike of animals. And the problem is animals hate me. And as a kid, I had a lot of bites from dogs. I have scars all over my hands from dog bites. And the reason is, I'd show up at somebody's house and they'd say, oh, hey, John, our dog's super friendly. And I'd be like, really? And the dog would be like Hackle's race, baring its teeth. And they're like, wow, he's never done this before. And I'm like, that's because he's never seen anyone like me before. You know what I mean? Because your dog's racist. But no, but yes. Mosquitoes love me. I'm a delicacy to them. I'm like their chicken teriyaki. They just absolutely annihilate me. My wife is fine, right? She's so fine, but she'll be sitting there, no mosquitoes biting her. Me, I'm just getting absolutely bit up and destroyed. It's crazy, And we'll go for a walk in our subdivision. Kristen loves walks, and I don't mind walks, but here's the thing. In our subdivision, we've got a lot of things called horseflies, and they love my black hair. It gets hot in the sun, and they burrow in there, and they love biting my scalp, right? I hate getting bit in the scalp by horseflies, but that's what happens. So I'm always hitting my head, trying to kill these flies. You know what I mean? And eventually, when I get back home, I can literally shake my hair out like this, and all these horsefly carcasses will just drop out of my hair because of these flies that get me. So I don't like animals. You know what I mean? I don't like them. And I was a wilderness guide for this company called Expeditions Unlimited for a number of years. We do whitewater rafting, rock climbing, backpacking, houseboating, canoeing, whatever, right? And good company. We send our youth there. That's where who runs our movement camp trips and our gauntlet trips. It's really cool company. And it's fun to be full circle, right? To work there and then to send students there as a youth director and now as a pastor, and I love it. I love that company. But one trip we did one summer was a horseback riding trip. And for me, I am a superb whitewater pilot. Like, I am great at guiding whitewater. That's probably what I'm best at. I'm good at rock climbing. I can do it all. I'm good at it all. But I mean, horses, I have no idea what I'm doing. Literally have not touched a horse in my life. And my boss, Higgins, is like, hey, you're going to be on this horse trip. I'm like, Higgs, I don't even know. I have no idea what I'm doing. I can't do this. Like, I don't know. He's like, it's no big deal. Just pretend like you know what you're doing. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know the load capacity of a horse. What is it, probably 2,000 pounds? I don't know, they're big. So I'm like loading this thing up. They're like, oh, it's way too much. I'm like, oh, okay. My horse was allergic to me, I think, kept sneezing all the time. That's all it did, right? And it was ugly too, full of these little spots. It just was, its coat was like spot. It was gross, Looked sick, not in a good way. And the horse master, I don't know what you call a horse owner, but the guy we were renting the horses from was like, now you look like a strong young man. And you look like an excellent guide. And I'm like, you have a great judge of character. Everything you said is true, right? And then he said, this here, Gelding, we've had some trouble with him, but I know you can handle him. And I was like, that's his name, huh? Gelding, great. So I have no idea what I'm doing. And in my mind, I'm like, I cannot handle it. But I look him in the eye and I hear my mouth say, I can handle it. Yeah, no problem, right? And what followed was the most humiliating experience of my guiding career. All the kids on the trip were horse experts. You know why? Because you don't sign up for a horse trip unless you like horses, right? So I'm on this trip, and they told me it's trail ride. The horse is just going to follow the one in front of it. That's all you got. You just sit there. It'll just follow the one in front of it. My horse, Gelding, he did whatever he wanted to. We were on the trail. He saw some yummy bushes, so he's going off into the woods eating the bushes. And I'm like, Gelding, they're all going by us. Like, let's get back on the trail. What do you do, right? It's like, Gelding, we look bad as a unit right now. Like, we look really dumb. I'm concerned, Gelding. Can you help me? Help you, right? And then the next day, word got out to Gelding that I was dumb. I had no idea what I was doing, right? So Gelding just started, anytime there was a tree on the side of the trail, he'd just rub up against that tree and like smash my leg just to get me. I don't know why he did it. And then he'd see a low-hanging branch, and he'd be like, do the limbo, right? And I'm like, yeah, this is terrible, because the branches would all go over me, and I looked terrible. He had steering ropes that are called reins. I learned that. His were broken, though. They did not work at all. I was at his mercy. The horse master said, now don't pull too hard on those reins or Gelding might buck on you. And I was like, you mean do a wheelie? I don't want that. You know what I mean? Gelding was what they call a quarter horse, which I think means he's about quarter sized. He was big. If a quarter horse is that big, I don't want to see a real horse, because I'm guessing they'd be monstrous, but he was way high. I got on his back, and I'm like, I don't want to fall off him. And whenever I got on his back, he'd sneeze a lot and stamp his feet, right? And I was always afraid one of his big hoofs was going to smash my feet. I didn't want to get off Gelding when I got on him, right? So everybody would take a break. I'm like, I'm just going to stay on Gelding. Big mistake, though, because it turns out my legs totally, like, you know when your stuff falls asleep, like your legs and everything, it's like, this is bad. I was paralyzed, man. I'm telling you, I sat on that horse all day, and I could not move. It was awful. It was awful. All day, I just wanted to get home, right? I just wanted to get home. It was miserable. Have any of you ever played that old game called Oregon Trail? Remember this game? Raise your hand. Anybody play Oregon Trail? Yeah, some of you, okay? There's one generation. Oregon Trail is a computer game where you pretend that you and your family are going across the country in a horse and wagon, right? You're going across the country, horse and wagon, and in the game, it's kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure type thing. You buy all your stuff, and you buy all your stuff. Consequently, Oregon Trail is now horribly culturally insensitive and racist, along with Paw Patrol. So anyway, that aside, you travel across the country to settle new lands, and you'd buy your stuff, and you'd name your family, right? And you'd be like, oh, this one's name is Kristen, and this one's name is Jimmy, and this one's whatever. And then it'd be like, Jimmy died of dysentery. You'd be like, oh no, that's awful, right? You'd ford the river, and like you'd lose half your food, or you'd break an wagon axle, and you'd have to figure out what you're gonna do and whatever. But all this stuff would happen, and I was like so detached from it as a kid, right? I mean, I watched it happen, I was like, nah, I don't care, whatever, it's no big deal. I'm just playing a computer game. I feel like that time with expeditions on horseback really helped crystallize that game for me. Because I was literally in the plains, the desolate plains, hearing the cicadas making their sound and just thinking, this is the worst experience. Getting absolutely annihilated by horseflies, thinking, I hate this. Longing for a place to call home. That's what the trail feels like. I'm gonna be honest today. I feel like a lot of our doubts are like Oregon Trail. I'm gonna explain that. I've got 3 thoughts that I wanna share with you regarding this. One side note, not everybody has doubt, and that's okay. Okay, many people have this gift from God called a childlike faith. There's lots of people that have that. My wife has a childlike faith. Elise, a tall redhead on her staff, has what I call a childlike faith. And that's a gift from God. Jesus literally says, faith like a child is what he desires. It's a good thing. And this message is for the 50% of people, I would say, that struggle with doubt. And if you don't struggle with doubt, I just want you to know there's nothing wrong with you. That's a blessing from God. That's a good thing, right? Now, I want to share this for the people who do struggle with doubt. If you don't, just you're learning about them, but no, there's nothing wrong with you if you don't have it. 3 thoughts on doubts, horses, and the Oregon Trail. And my first point is really simple. Horses and wagons help us find our home and settle and build a life. And so do our doubts. See, here's what I mean by that. I'm going to explain that. Our doubt is not inherently bad. Our doubt is like a wagon in the Oregon Trail. What does a wagon do? You put all your stuff in the wagon, and in the wagon helps you find a better place to live, a better place to settle, a better place to do life. And that's what your doubts sort of do, right? When you're struggling with doubt with your relationships, sometimes you pack up your stuff and you find a different place to live relationally. Sometimes we do this with a job or a career. Sometimes if you have a doctor and you've had the same knee surgery 6 times, it's like, you know what, I got some doubts about him. I'm gonna go ahead and pack up and look for somewhere else to get knee surgery done, right? You pack up, and sometimes you end up doing full circle and you come back to where you were at the start. No, he is a good doctor, it's just, this is a tough situation, right? And of course, sometimes we can have doubt regarding our faith in religion and God. Now, God gave us doubt and skepticism to help us make good choices and find truth. That is a role that doubts can play. And like a horse and wagon, doubt can bring you to the ranch you will settle and build a life in. That's what doubt can do. I think doubt has led to lots of great discoveries. Pythagoras, looking at the sun and the moon, had doubt that the earth was flat, right? And that led to a lot of freedom, discovery, and prosperity. Doubts in the Darwinist narrative have led to many great discoveries. It has shown us that atheism is a dead theory. As the empirical, philosophical, and forensic evidence begins to pile up, we see that atheism is clearly untrue and that the God of the Bible is real because of doubt for many reasons. And I could make the whole sermon about, this is why God is real and whatever, but I don't want to limit doubt to just our belief in God. I want to go broader than that, but I will give you one example. Obviously, I love cereal. I don't know, anybody here obsessed with cereal? I love cereal. I love cereal and milk. It's good. It's one of my favorite breakfasts. But I like kid cereal, and one that I enjoy is Alpha-Bits, right? Alpha-Bits is delicious. And if I came down one morning and I saw written in Alpha-Bits on my counter, John, I love you so much. You're the best husband ever. Sincerely, Kristen Hill, your wife. If I saw that note written on the counter, who do you think wrote that note? I would assume my wife wrote that note, but here's the truth. I did not see my wife write the note in Alpha-Bits cereal. I mean, it could be that note was caused by natural forces. I mean, perhaps the box was sitting in the cabinet, and over the course of a long period of time, a gust of wind came inside of our house from an HVAC malfunction that blew open the cabinet door, and the box happened to fall from the cabinet and get blown over and around onto the counter, at which point, an arc of electricity shot out of the GFI that was misfunctioning, the outlet on the counter, and happened to blow the top of the box open and cut open the bag inside, and at just the right velocity to cause the letters to spill out onto the counter into that note that says, John, I love you so much. You're the best husband ever. Love, Kristen Hill, your wife, right? I mean, that could be what caused it. And then, maybe a dog came by. I don't own a dog, but maybe a dog broke into my house and just nosed this thing back up into the cabinet, and then as it landed, there was a small black hole that developed underneath it that caused the top to just be sucked shut, from gravity and whatever, and then it sat there, and maybe that's what happened, right? Maybe that's what happened. But I mean, that would be unlikely. I would be foolish to think that natural forces caused it. I mean, I didn't technically see that my wife did it, but I mean, it is a pretty safe assumption. There's a preponderance of evidence that would indicate that would happen. Why? Because we know that natural forces, in all probability, could not cause all of those characters to be written in order in that way with nothing else to spill. I mean, it would be preposterous to think anything else. Now, the simplest form of life contains a lot of DNA in it. The literal, most simple first forms of life that we have discovered contain a ton of DNA. That double helix structure, adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, remember all that stuff? All those little amino acids that build into this double helix structure that contain information. Did you know that the simplest single-celled life form contains the same amount of information as 1,000 sets of encyclopedias? Little kids are like, what's an encyclopedia? It's like Wikipedia, except before that, right? And this is called an encyclopedia set, A to Z. If you want to know anything, you look it up in there, right? Now, Christians believe that only intelligent beings can create life forms containing and accurately duplicating information held within 1,000 sets of encyclopedias. Why? Because it is unlikely that lightning struck a pile of amino acids that just happened to form the hundreds of millions of characters in place in just the right way that would contain the accurate information of 1,000 sets of encyclopedias. And yet that's what would be required for natural forces to start even the simplest form of life. Not to mention the irreducible complexity of all the cells that keep the information intact, right? And what's gonna make the cellular membrane and the ribosomes and the mitochondria and all the other stuff, right? Remember that, guys, in 8th grade? Yes, that's great. You learned it for church. Listen, atheists believe non-intelligent natural forces can do this. Christians have evidence that supports their conclusion. Atheists have evidence contradicting their conclusion. And I believe that atheism requires a willful ignorance of facts, embracing superstition, and ignoring clear doubts. Doubts can save us from building a philosophical home in a bad place. And I'm thankful for that, right? That makes sense to me. It was doubt that saved me from a horrible long-term dating relationship in college. My wife is so thankful. It is doubt that saves us from internet phishing scams, right? Well, I do believe that I want to be a millionaire, but I don't believe that a Nigerian prince wants to give me his millions, right? This is false, right? I have doubt, I have skepticism. Doubts can save us from lots of different things. They move us towards truth, discovery, and prosperity. I think a lot of Christians believe that doubt is inherently bad. That is not true. Doubt is not bad. Doubt is, I think, a neutral tool or vehicle that can take us to a good place or a bad place. I, John Hill, your pastor, have doubts, lots of them. And in a lot of circumstances, my doubts have led me to a good place. In other circumstances, they have not. I have doubted my religions. I remember, and I was raised in a sort of intersectional home, right? On one side, we had atheism. On the other side, we had Buddhism. And in my home, we had Christian perspectives. So it was a lot. It was a lot, especially at the holidays. I remember my uncle and his sister sharing their faith with me of atheism. And there was a lot of, drunkenness involved, so it might not have been the clearest presentation, but there was a lot of pressure. And I had doubt in what they were talking about. As I read the books, Hitchens and Dawkins and all the things that they wanted me to read, and Harris and all the different books that they wanted me to read, I just thought, number one, the demeanor and tone of these authors is nasty and cruel, and I don't like that. And number two, if you look at the historical legacy of these movements, if you look at the 20 million people killed by the Soviet Union, atheist Soviet Union, if you look at the millions of people that are consistently killed, if you look at the way that we're devaluing human life in America as we skew away from the teachings of Jesus, we can see the consistent legacy of secular humanism, secularism, or atheism is almost always unilaterally destructive, right? I mean, we can watch this happen. I just remember thinking, well, that's not good. And then fundamentally on a cosmological level, there is no answer for where we came from in this cult. And that's what I concluded it was. I also have doubted Christianity. It was my doubts that led to a years-long search, and the result was a faith hardened by the fire and ready to withstand the onslaught it would face as a senior pastor. Doubt is not bad. Doubt is a tool that when steered to the right place, carries us to lands to build a good life within. The key is though steering it to the right place. My second point is pretty simple. Don't let the wagon be run by the horses. You must be the master of your doubts. In Oregon Trail, there were a series of negative events that could happen to you. You could be robbed by bandits. You could have the axle of your wagon break. You could ford a river and drown, dysentery, whatever. Another event that could happen, I don't know if you guys remember this one, was the runaway wagon. This is where your horses would get spooked and they'd go really fast and you'd be in the wagon and stuff would be bouncing out and whatever, and it usually resulted in your wagon getting broken or you losing a bunch of things, right? And I want you to imagine what that would feel like. Imagine sitting in an Oregon Trail covered wagon, your horses get spooked, and all of a sudden you're bouncing along the path, right? I wish I had a horse, I wish I had one of those, on the broomstick thing. That would be funny, but I don't have it. So anyway, you're running along, you're out of control, what would you feel like? Well, I would feel anxious. I would feel isolated. I would feel out of control, and I would feel alone. I think that is exactly what runaway doubt feels like in my life. Very, very similar. I think so often what we do, we let this what if scenarios run out of control in our head. It's not productive. You're isolated, you're alone, the world is whirring by you. There's nothing possibly good that is coming out of this. You're just held captive by our doubts. In the depth of my greatest doubts, I have foolishly let the wagons run wild for a time. In the sea of anxiety, fear, and panic, not really looking for a place to settle, just riding my fears out, hoping that the horses would tire. And they don't tire. I am confident that the 3 serious panic attacks that I've had in my life were rooted in runaway doubts. That's what the anxiety was. It was runaway doubts that I never took control of. Ironically, none of those attacks had anything to do with my faith in God. It was other things. It was actually construction projects. But anyway, I'm at the best when I rein my doubts in and I systematically examine what I believe and why. When you have doubts, You make sure you rein in those horses, and you make them go to work for you. And you make sure they're pulling the wagons on an orderly path. Otherwise, you'll go too fast, and you'll never determine the right spot to settle. Believing in God, I think, is kind of easy because the evidence is all there. I mean, that's not the difficult part. But taming the beast of your doubt, that is the challenge. If you don't tame that beast, you'll never make it to the destination that you want to get to. And you'll drag your wagon in circles your whole life. You'll never get anywhere. And I know people, that's what they do. They just drag their wagon in circles their whole life, panicking. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? James 1:6b through 8 talks about this. He says, do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. He's talking about doubt. He says, such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Right? He's not saying that God doesn't want to bless you. It's just you're so panicked, you're whizzing by all the wonderful places that God wants to take you. You're just running around it in your life. And I know people who struggle with doubt. That's what it feels like. He says, their loyalty is divided between God and the world, and they are unstable in everything they do. That is a benchmark of runaway doubt. Unstable in everything they do. It's the best day ever. It's the worst day ever. I love my job. I hate my job. I love my husband. I want a divorce. Right? It's just up and down and unstable all the time. I got to start a new career. I'm starting this. I'm starting that. I know people who live their life this way. Tossed about by a sea of doubts. Not just for faith in God, but for faith in everything. Runaway doubt is destructive. You don't get places. You got to tame that beast. You got to tame those horses, and you got to make them go to work for you. Third point. Like a horse and wagon, doubt is a tool that we use, and we dismantle when we are done. We dismantle it. When you're playing Oregon Trail and you beat the game, what did the pioneers do with a wagon? Shane, do you remember what they do? They would take apart that wagon, and they would use that wagon to build their homestead, right? And there are two reasons for this. Number one, if you didn't take apart the wagon, you'd be missing out on a great opportunity for resources. When you're impoverished, you want to use any resource that you get your hands on to build something. The wagon is full of, wood and nails and, a big cover and whatever else to build a house out of. I think the second reason is if you're trying to settle someplace and you have a hard time and that wagon is just sitting in the corner of the lot, it's a really great way to escape going through something difficult. And I think a lot of times, if you did that, you'd sort of get rid of these dreams before you could develop them into something meaningful. That's a big problem in life. I know a lot of people who do that. I know when we're dating, we're doing what I like to call cruising. Did anybody ever remember cruising where you just drive up and down Main Street and like talking with people? That's what you did before social media, right? If you wanted to meet a girl before Tinder, you just drive up and down Main Street and you turn around and you come back, right? If you saw somebody look cute, you pull into a gas station and you tie. Anybody remember this? Anybody ever do this? Yeah. Everybody over like 40 did this, okay? Chrissy, you did it too. Yeah, you and me, okay? We're like the last age, right? Before like you just cruise up and down and talk, right? All the kids are like, are you serious? Is that what you actually, yeah. We'd burn gas driving up and down Main Street, okay? What you're doing is you're driving in the wagon looking for a place to settle. You're like, hello. Would you be a good marriage material, right? And when you pull in the gas station, you're literally investigating, saying, would this be a good place to build a homestead? Would this person be a good place, right? You're investigating, you're looking. When you get married, what you're doing is you're getting out of the wagon, and you're saying, I'm done looking, I'm settling here. I think it would be super unhealthy in a marriage if I kept the wagon together. And every single morning I said, love you, before I go working on the house, I'm gonna get back in the wagon, I'm gonna go cruising again, looking around, right? That would be super unhealthy. That would be ineffective. That'd be a great way to destroy a good relationship. Because there will be hard times in the relationship, and when you fight, it's like hurtful to be like, I'm gonna get back in the wagon and go look somewhere else. I'm gonna see if there's anything better. If not, I'll be back, right? No, that's horrible. Because you made a big investment in that relationship. You put years into, digging ditches and building fences and building barns and whatever else. Yet so many people do this with so many different critical areas of our lives. We do this with the wagon of doubt, with our jobs and careers, right? We move to a new place, but we never actually put down roots. We just keep scouting with fond memories of the past and longing for the future. That's a mark of somebody who struggles with doubt. I just wish I could go back. Wish I could go back to that time. It was so much better back then. You know what's funny to me is I knew you back then, and back then you complained about back then. You know what I mean? Longing for the back then before the back then. I didn't know you back then, but I knew you back then. You know what I mean? And back then wasn't that good to you. Sometimes people long for the future, and it's like you're never building the moment when you struggle with doubt. You just keep scouting. The hard part is the wagon is nicer than the early phase of building a farm. When you first start building a new life, it's hard because when you're in the wagon, just riding, this is what the wagon looks like to me, okay? When you're riding in the wagon, you don't have any responsibility. You don't have to do anything. You don't have any property. You don't have to make property. You're just riding low in the wagon, and it's fine. There's nothing to do, right? It's easy. I mean, you don't have a life. You're not making any progress. You're not actually moving forward. You're just riding. And the problem with the first phase of life, it's hard. Colton, our Hebrew worship director, just moved into a new house. They don't have a shower yet. Colton, please come to my house if you need to. You know what I mean? I'm not saying you need to, but, love you, kidding. But listen, that first phase of rebuilding the family, of organizing your stuff, of doing all these things, when you move to a new place, it's hard. And if you keep that wagon together, if you don't dismantle your doubt, it's tempting to abandon ship. If we keep the wagon parked, it's easy to go back. And I know so many people who keep the wagon of doubt ready and loaded with every job, with every friendship, with every church, with your kids. It's always the wagon of doubt, fear, and insecurity. And you have a legacy of incomplete projects. That's your life. It's a legacy of incomplete homesteads. I started building a house here and I didn't like it, and I got in and I went over here and I started this career and I didn't like it, and I went back to school and more student debt and I did this and that and this. And your whole life is a legacy of incomplete projects. You run away from making a great life because you're always looking for another place to settle, but never actually building anything of substance. When the wagon of doubt brings you past a great place to settle, you got to settle and dismantle. That's what you do. And as you dismantle the wagon, you won't be able to abandon ship as easily. And you'll see parts of the wagon integrated into your life, and you'll remember why you settled in the first place. We see so many heroes of the faith go through this process. There's a replete set of examples in the Bible, but one of my favorite perhaps is Peter. Peter, the apostle of Jesus. And the Bible is a collection of books, 66 books bound into one larger collection. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are all biographies of the life of Jesus. And if you read them, you'll notice the first part of Jesus' life, his disciples, his 12 closest friends, are kind of standoffish from Jesus. They're kind of evaluating. They're in the wagons, sitting around the camp of Jesus, and they're deciding, do we want to get out? And they watch Jesus do all these miracles. He casts out demons. He heals people blind from birth. He does all this great stuff. And then it's interesting to see the miracle that really tips the scales for them. It's the feeding, the miraculous feedings. He feeds 5,000 people and then 4,000 people with 7 loaves of bread and 3 fishes. And that's kind of remarkable to me. If you think about what really tipped the scale of their heart. I mean, the thing that spoke to the disciples was food. I think it's a reminder today of how blessed we are with food abundance in our lives. That it's not like that's the miracle that we're waiting for, right? But for Peter, it changes his life. You can see the moment in Matthew 16, verse 15. It says, then he asked them, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter answered, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, you are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. Peter rides the wagon of his doubt. He's riding around. He hangs out with Jesus, and he reaches this place where he's like, Jesus, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. I would die for you, right? He loves Jesus in this moment. He's like, I'm all in. I'm getting out of the wagon. He gets out of the wagon. But then something happens in Matthew 26 in verse 31. It says, on the way, Jesus told them, tonight all of you will desert me. But Peter declared, even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you, man. And Jesus is like, I tell you the truth, Peter, this very night before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. What is he doing? He's calling out Peter saying, well, Peter, you got out of the wagon, but you never dismantled your doubt. And you've kept it there as an escape plan. And I know when the going gets tough, you're going to get in that thing and you're going to run away. Peter's like, I would never. But Jesus knows you haven't dismantled the doubt yet. And that's exactly what happens. In verse 69, it says, meanwhile, Peter was sitting outside the courtyard. A servant girl came over and said to him, you are one of those with Jesus, the Galilean. But Peter denied it in front of everyone. I don't even know what you're talking about, he said. Peter falls prey to his doubts. What does he do? He gets back in that wagon. The horses get spooked, and now he's in that runaway wagon. Everything's going crazy, and he's sitting back there all catatonic and isolated and alone and afraid. You can read in the Bible exactly what happens. Peter runs away from everything. He isolates himself from his friends. He does exactly what you do when you're in a runaway wagon of doubt, and so many of us have been there. You know what I'm describing. You know what it feels like. You're just afraid of everything. Oh, so much anxiety, so much fear, so much panic. You're sitting there like, what's going to happen? What if this? What if that? And you can't even move forward in life because you're held captive in this wagon, not getting anywhere but going everywhere. The horses are spooked. It's exactly what Peter does. Now, Jesus conquers sin, death, and Satan. He rises from the grave. He reveals himself to his disciples, but Peter is still isolated. And you can kind of see that. There's this tension. He's isolated from Jesus. He's still in this runaway wagon. So Jesus takes all the disciples on a fishing trip after he rises from the grave, and they're having breakfast on the trip. And it says, after breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, Peter replied. You know that I love you. Then feed my lambs, Jesus told him. They have the same conversation again. And he replies in the same way. And a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt that Jesus asked him the question a third time. And he said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus replied, then feed my sheep. What is he doing right here? Peter is spooked. He's got this runaway carriage. He's got this runaway wagon. And Jesus rides up alongside of it. He grabs hold of the reins of the horses, pulling Peter's wagon. And he slows him down. He calms him down. And he talks to Peter. And he says, I want you to get out of this wagon. And I want you to build a house of faith with me. And I want you to dismantle your doubts in the process. In fact, if you read verses 18, 19, and 20, Jesus looks at Peter and he says, are you willing to die for this? Following me means you're gonna have to die in your life. You specifically. He literally says, John's not gonna have to die, but you are gonna have to die. That's what he tells him. And Peter in that moment dismantles his doubts. He takes apart the wagon. I want to challenge you to do the same. This message is not meant to talk about doubt being limited to faith. Doubt is a natural part of our lives. It's a wagon that when used correctly will bring us to great places. But if not, it will destroy our lives. And I think there's a lot of people who have doubt destroying so many different areas of your life. You're just letting that wagon run out of control. You're just held captive to your own fears. I think sometimes people think that if they really had faith, if they didn't struggle with doubt, they wouldn't hear the voices anymore. I don't think that's actually true. I think I've addressed the doubts in my life. I still hear the voices. Here's what I mean by that. Kristen and I have the best marriage ever that I've ever seen. Like it really is. I've never seen a marriage that I like more than mine. I mean, I love my marriage. We are, not to brag, it's just truly a blessing from God, emotionally, physically, spiritually, relationally, on a work level. Like our marriage is awesome. I couldn't ask for a better friend and partner in life. We were, I really believe, made for each other. At least every other day. I still remember the wagon of doubt. Remember, I'm a doubter, I'm a skeptic. I hear these questions a lot. Sometimes I hear the voice, what if she's not the one, right? Sometimes I hear, what if she leaves you, right? Because she's been working late for Hebron a lot. She's out, till 9 o'clock in these meetings. I'm like, what if she's going out on me? Thank God for Find My. I'm like, nope, she's at church, right? Is that creepy? Yes. Answer, yes, that is creepy. Sometimes I think she's such a weight. I just wish I could work more hours. She makes me come home and be emotional with her, and I don't have any more of that to give, right? I could work 100 hours a week if it wasn't for her. But here's the thing. I dismantled the wagon of my doubt. Here's the thing. I investigated and determined that she was the best match that I could possibly imagine. And this is so John Hill, but I made a list of 13 must-haves and 11 can't-haves in a partner. And I'd never found a girl that made all of those requirements, right? I was really systematic about it because I knew falling in love is easy, staying in love is hard. I mean, Kristen is truly remarkable. I investigated and I made a decision to take apart my doubt. And so here's the thing. Choosing to dismantle your doubt doesn't mean you no longer hear the voices of doubt. It means you don't heed them. It means you don't listen to them. Sometimes they shout at me a lot, but I don't listen to those voices because I made a decision. I mean, nothing's ever certain. I mean, she could leave me. She could betray me. I could fail her. I could have made a mistake, but I choose not to listen to those voices. I choose faith in my decision. And I want to be clear, faith is not a superstitious, dogmatic, intentional ignorance of facts. That's what atheism requires. The cult of atheism requires you to ignore the truth. Faith instead, real faith, is a decision to accept the evidence and to put doubt away and to build a life. This is what I've done with my wife. I've made a decision in light of the evidence to build a life, despite the voices. I don't listen to them. I don't heed them. I hear them, but I've made a decision to walk in faith. Same things happen with my kids. I love my kids, but sometimes I hear the voices of doubt, like they're ruining your life. Sometimes it actually feels like they're ruining my life. Sometimes I feel like I'm ruining their life, right? But in spite of all that, I choose faith. Regarding Jesus, I, your pastor, still hear voices of doubt. You're not really going to heaven. What if it's not real? And just like with my wife, just like with my job, just like with my kids, the feeling of doubt is a beast that I have chosen to break and master. And I choose to not listen to those voices. I have dismantled it. This is where I am. I am married to my wife, and for the rest of my life, I will be faithful. If she leaves, I'm coming with her, right? I'm with her. Regarding my faith in Jesus, I hear the voices, but I do not heed them. I've dismantled my doubt. This is who I'm going to be. I'm building a life here. I think about Paul, what I read about him. Remember what we read about him last week? I love that passage, Romans 8:35. It was like the jam of the whole thing. And I said I wasn't gonna hoot and holler, and I didn't really, but I kind of did a little bit. And this is what it says. Paul says, can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Right? That's a great doubtful question right there. Where did he hear that? Where did that come from? That's the voice of doubt in his head. Does it mean he no longer loves us? That's a question a lot of us ask. If we fill in the blank, he says if we have trouble or calamity or are persecuted or hungry or destitute or in danger or threatened with death, why does he list all these things right here? Why these things and not a body image issue? Why these things and not talking about his wife leaving him? Why these things and not talking about the myriad of other different issues that most of us struggle with? Because these are the issues that he personally has faced. These are the voices of doubt in his life. Paul, the greatest pastor of all time. Paul, the founder of the early church, the apostle of Christ Jesus. That Paul had doubts, and this is how he dealt with them. He investigated, he dismantled, and he made a decision to build a life. No, despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us in all things, at all times. He handled them by breaking them, putting them away. He had found his ranch in Christ Jesus, and he made his decision to build a life there. And his life was amazing and influential because he got off the wagon and dismantled his doubts. He didn't let doubts destroy it. Now, I know some of you are like, Pastor, I need a little bit more detail. I mean, how do I actually dismantle the wagon? What do I do? And I'm gonna tell you exactly what I did, okay? In all of my decisions in life, I create in my mind a systematic process to address the fundamental questions, okay? Rather than sitting in the wagon running out of control, like the wagon's running out of control and what if, I say, I'm gonna make a list of the fundamental questions that I have. Will she be faithful? Will we be a good match? Will we whatever? And then I investigate. I actually investigate. With my faith, I made a list of all the questions, right? How do we know that God is real? And how do we know that, like, the narrative that I hear about atheism is not, and whatever, and I want to know these things. So I read the books, right? And I read lots of them that were not productive, and some of them were cruel and nasty, on both sides, actually, but the one that I read that I found really helpful because it was kind and grace-filled and helpful, and it is a little eggheady, but it's not that hard to understand, was Frank Turek's book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Frank Turek, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. I loved that book. I would say that that was one of the most seminal books in my life. I reread it this last week. It was really great. But there was this moment where I realized my questions have been answered. All of them have been addressed. You know what's funny is because all those questions were answered, but in the moment I still felt doubt. I still felt the same what ifs, but I realized I'd answered all those questions. And so I made a decision to not heed those voices anymore. I didn't. It wasn't blind faith. It was accepting the forensic, scientific, and historical evidence and building a life accordingly rather than listlessly waiting around, wandering, and wasting my life. I want to ask you, where are you at right now? Something can't come from nothing. Hundreds of minute prophecies written in the Bible cannot randomly be fulfilled. There's no other religion. Christianity is unparalleled in the way that our Holy Scripture happens to correspond with archaeology, history, time, sociology. You need to choose who you're going to be. You need to make a decision. I don't want you to waste your life. And please, especially young people here today, do not waste your life. I see a whole generation of people that are held captive by their doubts. You are riding around in circles everywhere in life, not committed to anything. You're keeping your options open. You're missing out on the joy that comes from building something meaningful. I think specifically, I see a lot of people circling the camp of Christianity in the wagon, and you feel like you're a Christian, but you've never made a decision to get out of the wagon. You show up every weekend and you leave, and you show up every weekend and you leave. But I want to ask you, who are you going to be? Who are you going to choose to be? Are you going to get out of that wagon and actually build something? I think so many of us, we don't actually invest. We don't actually build the life. We just hang out, and you're missing out on the joy and the meaning that comes from building something great with your life. Don't waste your life. Don't waste your life. The answers are there, but you need to make a decision. You need to make a decision about who you're going to be. For me, I've decided to follow Jesus. Listen, my faith is stronger than it has ever been. And I know many people are struggling with faith, but I want you to hear this. God is real. He is who He says He is. And you will stand before Him at the end of this life. Are you ready to meet Him? He's there. He's waiting for you. Will you build your life with Him? Will you build your life with Him? Will you get out of that wagon? Will you dismantle it and build it with Him? 4 questions that I want you to ask yourself. I challenge you, if you're part of a family that is here, I challenge you to have this discussion with them at the very least. Take a picture of it and journal it and write your answers to this. But 4 questions. Number 1, what areas of doubt do you struggle with, if any? For my wife and Elise, they'd be like, none. And I'm like, that's awesome. For me, I struggle with a lot, right? And I want my kids to know that. I want my kids to know that marriage requires a suspension of the voices in my head. Because if one of my daughters happens to inherit my skepticism, I don't want them to be disenchanted when they get married and they realize their husband doesn't come home riding a unicorn with Skittles bursting out of their ears and a bottle of champagne every single day and washboard abs the rest of their life. You know what I mean? I don't want my sweet Hermione to come home and be like, Dad, it's so hard and this and that, and your marriage was perfect and you never had. And it's like, no, I did. But I made a decision about who I was gonna be, and I dismantled the doubt and I took apart the wagon, and you need to do that too. I want them to know that. I want them to hear that. Number two, how has your doubt carried you to better places? That's a big question in your life. Because I think for a lot of us, our doubt hasn't carried us anywhere. We're just panicking the whole time. Maybe it's time to admit that, which brings me to my third question. What areas of your life have you let the wagon of doubt run away? And how can you stop it? I think the first step in getting out of the runaway wagon is admitting that you're in a runaway wagon in different areas of your life. You need to say, hey, I'm letting my fear and uncertainty and my trust issues destroy our relationship, and I want to ask for your forgiveness. I'm letting my fear and my trust issues destroy our spiritual life. Will you forgive me? I'm letting my fear and my trust issues destroy our career. And I'm running our family financially into the ground because I just can't handle it. And will you forgive me for getting in this runaway wagon and for not providing? Right? I mean, it's time to deal with it. And finally, this is a big one. Are you circling the camp, or are you building the homestead of faith? I want you to choose who you're gonna be. I see so many Christians struggling today in their faith. And it's because of a runaway wagon. Listen, the land of Jesus is a great land, and you know it. But you gotta get out of the wagon and say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I'm dismantling the doubt. This is where I'm at for the rest of my life. You must decide who you're going to be. I want you to make that decision. Are you circling the camp? Are you building a homestead of faith? I think the best way for me and my family to actually build a homestead has been to get out of the wagon and build a church together. That's what we've done. You know, we've gotten involved, we serve, we give. I want to ask you to consider who you're going to be in your life. We're at this precipice as a church. And instead of sitting in the wagon your whole life, I would encourage you to say, you know what, I'm in. You text I'm in to 474747. And we want to help you actually choose to be a part of this, not just to watch it, but to be a part of it. You can volunteer, you can serve, you can get into a life group. We can help counsel you for where you're at as far as spiritually, like, hey, I've got these questions. I want to know how to deal with them, right? Can you point me in the right direction? We want to help you. What I don't want you to do is to leave this message and be like, yep, Pastor was describing me perfectly. Yeah, that's so much of my life. What's for lunch? That's not what I want. I want you to do something. As we close, I want to ask you guys to stand, and I'm going to pray for you. Jesus, in an uncertain age, I lift up this church to you, and I thank you for the certainty of your promises in our life. I thank you that you don't ask for blind faith. You call us to an informed faith. I pray that you would give the church the courage to take a stand for you and to say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I pray that for each person in this room, you would give us the courage to choose who we're going to be, to dismantle our doubts systematically, and to choose to serve you all of our days, generation after generation. Thank you for your faithfulness and for your promises. In the name of Jesus, all God's people said amen and amen. The band is going to lead us in a song called You Can Do All Things. And I love this song because for me, it's a declaration of what I believe God actually can do. I want to encourage you to worship God with this song. Let's sing together.